Why the soul sometimes chooses a difficult death. There is a question that haunts the quiet hours. It whispers in hospital corridors. It echoes in the space between prayers. It rises in the chest of anyone who has watched someone they love depart through suffering while another slips away in peace. Why do some souls leave gently and others through agony? It's the question no one asks aloud, because to ask it feels like betrayal, like you're measuring grief, like you're suggesting there's a hierarchy to dying. But the question persists, not because you lack faith, not because you've given up on meaning, but because somewhere deep inside, beneath the confusion and the sorrow, you sense there might be an answer, a sacred answer, one that doesn't diminish the pain but transfigures it. This isn't a video about easy explanations. This is a transmission about what Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, revealed across thousands of readings about the soul's relationship to its own departure. What you're about to hear may comfort you, it may disturb you, it will almost certainly change how you see death and life. Because by the time we reach the end of this journey together, you'll understand that the hardest passages are often the most intentional, that suffering can be initiation, that what looks like tragedy from the outside may be mastery from within. So take a breath, light a candle if you need to. What follows is not theology, it's revelation. And it begins before birth itself. Edgar Cayce spoke of something that appears across mystical traditions worldwide, yet remains invisible to those who see only with physical eyes, the pre-birth council. Before you entered this body, before your first breath in this particular lifetime, your soul existed in what Cayce called the borderland, that luminous space between incarnations where consciousness reviews, reflects, and plans. In documented readings preserved in the ARE archives, Cayce described how souls don't stumble blindly into incarnation. They prepare, they study, they sit in council with guides, teachers, and sometimes with the very souls who will become their parents, their children, their greatest teachers and adversaries. This isn't reincarnation as punishment, it's reincarnation as sacred theater. Your soul reviewed potential life paths the way an actor studies scripts. It saw timelines branching like roots through soil. It witnessed possible futures, probable challenges, the karma waiting to be balanced, the gifts waiting to be given. And yes, it chose its entrance. The family, the circumstances, the strengths and the wounds, the body itself with all its capacities and limitations. But here's where the teaching deepens into mystery. According to Cayce, the soul also contemplated its exit. Not in morbid obsession, but with the same intentionality it brought to everything else. Because the manner of departure, the how and the when, carries as much spiritual weight as the manner of arrival. In one reading, Cayce was asked directly, "Do we choose when we die?" His answer, delivered in trance, was both simple and profound. The soul is never taken, it is released, and often the terms of that release are set before the first breath is drawn. This doesn't mean your departure date is carved in stone. Cayce was clear, free will operates at every level. Choices made in life can extend or shorten the span of years. But there exists what he called the original agreement, a soul-level blueprint that includes not just life lessons, but life's conclusion. Think of it this way: you are both the author and the character. You wrote the story before you entered it, and while you have improvisation rights while you're here, the soul remembers the arc. It knows where the narrative is meant to resolve. This is not fatalism. This is empowerment hidden in paradox. Because if your soul chose this incarnation, this body, this family, this historical moment, then it also carried the wisdom to choose how to complete it. And some souls, for reasons we're about to explore, choose passages that from the outside appear unbearably difficult. But from the inside, from the soul's perspective, they may be acts of breathtaking courage. You've felt it, haven't you? That uncanny sense that certain deaths carry a signature of intentionality. Not all deaths, but some, the ones that shatter everything, the ones that arrive with such precision, such timing, that they seem almost orchestrated. A parent dies just as their child finally becomes ready to step into their own power. A sibling departs suddenly, and in their absence, a family's buried secrets finally surface. A friend exits in a way that forces an entire community to face what they'd been avoiding. Edgar Cayce called these catalyst departures. In his readings, he described how some souls incarnate with a specific mission that includes their exit strategy. Their death isn't incidental to their purpose, it is part of their purpose. This isn't metaphor, this is mechanics. Cayce explained that every soul carries what he termed soul memory, an awareness that transcends the conscious mind, residing in what he called the superconscious or the soul mind. This soul memory holds the pre-birth agreements, the karmic patterns, the evolutionary goals. And sometimes, that memory includes the knowledge that maximum growth, for the individual soul or for those connected to it, requires a specific kind of departure. Not random, not cruel, intentional. Consider a documented case from the ARE archives. A young woman, vibrant and healthy, began having recurring dreams months before her death. In these dreams, she saw herself standing at a threshold, speaking with luminous beings who told her, "Soon, when the fruit is ripe." She told no one except her journal. When she died unexpectedly in what appeared to be an accident, her family found the journal, and in reading it, something shifted. Her father, who had been emotionally shut down for decades, finally broke open. Her mother began painting, something she hadn't done since childhood. Her brother, lost in addiction, entered recovery. One death, multiple awakenings. Was this tragedy? Yes. Was it also somehow sacred assignment? The family came to believe so. Cayce would say that this young woman's soul knew that her departure would be the only force powerful enough to crack the calcified patterns holding her family in stasis, that her exit would serve as the initiation her loved ones had been unconsciously requesting. But here's where we must tread carefully. This teaching is not about glorifying suffering. It's not about justifying injustice or excusing medical neglect. It's about expanding our capacity to hold mystery, to consider that reality might be far more multidimensional than we've been taught. Some deaths feel chosen because they were, and the reasons why they're about to be revealed. Edgar Cayce's readings, spanning over 40 years, revealed 5 archetypal patterns, 5 primary reasons a soul might choose a difficult passage. These aren't the only reasons. The soul's motivations are as unique as fingerprints, but these 5 emerge again and again in the documented cases, like threads woven through the fabric of human experience. The first reason, karmic completion. Cayce spoke often of karma not as punishment, but as spiritual physics. What you set in motion must eventually return, not to harm you, but to teach you, to balance you, to complete the circuit. In his readings, he described souls who carried ancient debts, agreements made in previous lifetimes that required specific circumstances to resolve. Sometimes that resolution happens through life experience, but sometimes the completion comes through the manner of death itself. In one documented reading, Cayce described a man who had been a tyrannical ruler in a past life, causing immense suffering through cruel policies. In his current incarnation, he was gentle, kind, beloved, but his soul carried the karmic weight of that ancient cruelty. His death came through a progressive illness that stripped him slowly of physical power, forcing him into complete dependence on the compassion of others. Cayce's reading indicated that this experience was the final balancing, learning through his own body what it meant to be vulnerable, powerless, dependent on mercy. The suffering wasn't random, it was curriculum. The second reason, accelerated evolution. Some souls, Cayce explained, are what he called old souls, beings who have incarnated many times and are approaching the completion of the earthly cycle. These souls sometimes choose condensed, high-intensity lives rather than multiple slower incarnations. It's the spiritual equivalent of a graduate program versus undergraduate study. If you can compress multiple lifetimes of growth into a single intense experience, you accelerate your evolution exponentially. The difficult death becomes the final exam, the crucible that forges mastery in a single passage. Cayce described one case of a child who died young after a life marked by physical limitation. In the reading, he explained that this soul had chosen a brief but transformative incarnation to complete work that might otherwise have required several lifetimes. The limitation wasn't limitation at all, it was precision. The soul knew exactly what it needed. The third reason, service to others. This is perhaps the most profound. Some souls choose difficult deaths because their manner of departure will serve as a catalyst for those who witness it. They become spiritual alarm clocks. Their exit is so shocking, so paradigm-shattering, that it forces loved ones to wake up, to face truth, to change course, to heal. Cayce called these beings light bringers through sacrifice, not martyrs in the religious sense, but souls so committed to collective evolution that they agree to become the lightning rod that attracts transformation. In their absence, families finally have the conversations they'd been avoiding. Communities finally address systemic problems. Individuals finally confront their own mortality and begin living differently. The departed soul knew this would happen, chose it, and from the other side watches the ripples with profound love. The fourth reason, energetic clearing. This one reaches into the realm of ancestral healing. Cayce spoke extensively about what he called hereditary patterns, not just genetic inheritance, but energetic inheritance. Trauma, shame, rage, grief, all of it can move through bloodlines like underground rivers. Some souls incarnate specifically to absorb and transmute these ancestral wounds. They take the poison into their own system so that those who come after will be born into cleaner energy. Their difficult death is the final act of metabolization, the last ceremony. They carry the accumulated shadow of generations into their own passage, and in dying, they clear it. One reading described a woman whose death by suicide completed a 7-generation pattern of maternal despair. Cayce's counsel to her surviving daughter was startling. She took the weight so you would not have to carry it. Honor her by living free. The fifth reason, timeline shifting. This is the most mystical of all. Cayce indicated that some souls choose specific deaths because their departure alters probability fields, shifting timelines not just for individuals, but for entire collectives. Think of it as strategic sacrifice on a cosmic scale. By departing in a particular way at a particular moment, the soul creates a divergence point. Future possibilities that would have remained dormant suddenly activate. It's the butterfly effect operating at the soul level. These 5 reasons aren't mutually exclusive. A single soul's departure might serve multiple purposes simultaneously, but understanding these patterns allows us to ask different questions when we witness difficulty. Not why is God punishing them, but what is this soul completing? What is being served? What might we not yet understand? And now we're going to explore each of these dimensions more deeply, beginning with the one that shatters families wide open. There are deaths that function as spiritual defibrillators. They stop time, they shatter illusion, they force everyone in proximity to feel when they've been numb for years. Edgar Cayce described these in his readings as sacrificial catalysts, souls who agree to exit in ways so shocking that their departure becomes the only thing powerful enough to wake their loved ones from sleepwalking. This isn't about drama, it's about spiritual physics. Sometimes denial runs so deep, patterns so calcified, that nothing short of a seismic event will break through. And certain souls, often the most sensitive, the most empathic, the ones who feel everything, take on the role of disruptor. In one documented case, a family came to Cayce after their teenage son died by suicide. The reading that followed was both devastating and liberating. Cayce explained that this young man had carried an extraordinary psychic sensitivity. He felt the unspoken pain in everyone around him, his father's buried rage, his mother's quiet desperation, his sister's hidden addiction. The family presented a perfect surface to the world, but underneath they were drowning. The son's soul, before incarnation, had agreed to serve as the mirror that would finally crack that surface. His departure wasn't escape, it was assignment. In the aftermath, the father entered therapy and began processing decades of repressed anger. The mother started painting, expressing grief she'd held since childhood. The sister entered recovery. The family became, for the first time, honest. Cayce told them gently, "He gave you the gift of truth through his absence. Now you must honor him by living it." This teaching can feel unbearable, because how do you hold both the grief of loss and the possibility that the loss was somehow necessary. How do you reconcile love with such fierce spiritual pragmatism? Cayce would say, you don't reconcile it, you expand to hold both. The person who departs this way doesn't suffer for you in the sense of punishment or burden. They suffer with consciousness, with purpose, knowing that their exit creates an opening where none existed before. Think of it as surgery. The incision hurts, but it also heals. Another case, a mother of 3 died suddenly in an accident. Her husband had been having an affair for years. Her oldest daughter was planning to leave college to care for everyone. Her youngest son was being bullied, and no one had noticed. After her death, everything came to light. The husband's affair exposed, forcing him to confront his choices. The daughter, freed from caretaking, discovered her own path. The son, finally seen, received help. The mother's reading indicated she had known, on a soul level, that her family needed disruption more than they needed he. Our physical presence, that her departure would do what her living presence couldn't, force everyone to face reality and make different choices. This is where the teaching becomes almost unbearably tender, because it suggests that the hardest love is sometimes walking away, that the most profound service is creating absence so those you love can finally step into presence. The soul who chooses this path isn't abandoning anyone, they're setting everyone free, including themselves. But there's another layer to this. If you've witnessed such a death, if you're the one left behind trying to make sense of the wreckage, Cayce's readings offer something crucial. You were meant to wake up. That doesn't mean you're being punished. It means you're being invited into deeper aliveness. The person who departed didn't die at you. They died for evolution, yours, theirs, the collective's. Your task now isn't to figure out if it was worth it. Your task is to receive the teaching, to let their absence reshape you, to become the person their departure made space for you to become. This is how sacrifice becomes sacred. And this is only the first of the 5 dimensions. There's a kind of death that reaches backward and forward through time. Edgar Cayce understood what indigenous cultures have always known. We don't just inherit genes from our ancestors. We inherit their unfinished emotional business, their trauma, their shame, their unprocessed grief. What one generation refuses to feel, the next generation must carry, unless someone agrees to metabolize it. In his readings, Cayce described certain souls as karmic healers of the bloodline. These are beings who incarnate specifically to absorb ancestral pain, to take it into their own system, process it, and through their death, release it. They are lineage clearers. One documented case involved a young man who died of addiction after years of struggle. When his family consulted Cayce's readings, they learned something astonishing. This pattern of compulsive behavior and early death had moved through their family line for 6 generations. His great-great-great-great-grandfather had been enslaved. The trauma of that experience, the powerlessness, the rage, the dissociation, had never been witnessed or healed. It simply passed down, expressing differently in each generation but always present. Addiction, violence, sudden departures. This young man's soul had agreed before birth to be the one who would finally carry it all the way through. His difficult death was the completion of the circuit, the metabolization, the clearing. Cayce's guidance to the family was specific. He took it into himself so that his children, should he have had them, would not inherit it. And your children after him will be born into cleaner energy. Honor him as the healer he was. This isn't metaphor. Modern epigenetics is beginning to confirm what mystics have always known. Trauma alters expression at the genetic level, and it can be passed down across generations. But so can healing. When one person in a lineage finally faces the shadow, finally feels what everyone else refused to feel, they interrupt the transmission. The pattern stops with them. Their difficult passage becomes the ceremony that frees everyone downstream. Another reading described a woman whose death by chronic illness seemed, from the outside, like prolonged suffering without purpose. But Cayce revealed that she was carrying her mother's unexpressed grief, her grandmother's suppressed rage, her great-grandmother's terror. 3 generations of women who smiled through pain, who never complained, who held it all inside until their bodies became repositories of unlived emotion. This woman's illness was the body finally speaking, and her death was the final release, not just for her, but for the entire maternal line. Cayce told her daughter, "Your mother gave you a gift. You will not carry what she carried, but you must honor it by feeling your own feelings, speaking your own truth. That's how the clearing completes." If you're reading this and wondering if you are a wound carrier, Cayce offered signs. You feel things no one else in your family seems to feel. You're drawn to healing work, even though you can't explain why. You experience symptoms or patterns that seem larger than your personal history. You have dreams or visions of ancestors you've never met. Your struggles feel ancient, like they've been happening forever. These aren't pathology, they're assignment. And here's the liberation hidden in this teaching. If you are a wound carrier, your suffering has never been meaningless. Every difficult moment has been transmutation. Every time you didn't give up, you were healing backward through time. The question isn't, why me? The question is, who else if not me? Because someone has to be willing to feel it all. Someone has to stand in the fire and say, this stops here. And that someone, often, is the most sensitive soul in the lineage. The nay who came in a wake, the one who couldn't pretend. If your death comes through difficulty and you are a wound carrier, know this. You are completing work that your ancestors couldn't complete. Your passage will free those who come after you. You are not a victim. You are an alchemist. There's a radical teaching hidden in Cayce's readings, one that completely reframes suffering. Some souls don't want the slow path. They don't want multiple comfortable lifetimes of gradual learning. They want intensity, compression, the fast track to spiritual mastery. And they're willing to choose difficulty in life and in death to get there. Cayce called these beings advanced students, not better than other souls, but further along in the curriculum. And at a certain point in the soul's evolution, the only lessons left are the ones that require maximum pressure. Think of a diamond. It doesn't form through gentle conditions. It forms through intense heat and crushing pressure over time. The carbon doesn't become crystal through ease, it becomes crystal through extremity. The soul understands this. In one reading, a parent asked Cayce why their child had been born with severe physical limitations, only to die young. The answer was startling. This entity chose a brief incarnation of intense challenge rather than multiple lifetimes of moderate learning. What might have taken 3 or 4 incarnations to master was compressed into 12 years. The soul is not less developed for having lived briefly. It is more developed for having chosen intensity. This reframes everything. From a human perspective, we see a child's suffering and death as the ultimate tragedy. But from a soul perspective, that child may have been operating at a graduate level, choosing conditions that would forge mastery in a single passage. The difficult death becomes the final exam, the culmination, the moment when everything learned crystallizes into wisdom. Cayce described how certain souls, when they reach a particular stage of evolution, begin to see physical incarnation differently, not as punishment or even as neutral experience, but as opportunity. The earth plane becomes a kind of spiritual gym, a place where the soul can build strength impossible to develop in the peaceful realms between lives. And just as an athlete might choose the most rigorous training regimen precisely because it produces the greatest results, an advanced soul might choose difficult circumstances, including difficult death, for the same reason. One documented case involved a man who developed a progressive neurological disease in his 40s. Over the course of a decade, he lost mobility, speech, independence. His death was slow, requiring total surrender. When his wife consulted the readings, Cayce explained that this man had been a warrior in multiple past lives, always in control, always dominant, always refusing vulnerability. This lifetime, this disease, this death, it was the soul's strategic choice, the only experience that could teach him what power truly is, not control over others, but surrender to what is, not dominance, but trust, not fight, but acceptance. By the time he died, he had mastered what he came to master. The disease wasn't curse, it was curriculum. But here's what makes this teaching both liberating and dangerous. It's only true if the soul actually chose it, and you can't know that from the outside. Cayce was clear, not all suffering is soul-chosen. Some is circumstantial, some is injustice, some is the result of human cruelty or systemic violence. The teaching about accelerated evolution applies to certain souls, in certain circumstances, under certain conditions. It's not a blanket statement to spiritually bypass real harm. So how do you know the difference? Cayce offered guidance. When suffering leads to profound internal transformation, when the person or those around them are visibly evolving, deepening, awakening, that's a sign the soul is using the difficulty as intended. When suffering only creates more suffering, when it destroys rather than refines, when it closes rather than opens, that's a sign something has gone wrong. Either the soul's plan got derailed by free will choices, or the suffering was never soul-chosen to begin with. This discernment matters. Because if you're walking through difficulty right now, whether in your own dying or in witnessing someone else's, you need to know, this teaching is not asking you to pretend suffering doesn't hurt. It's not asking you to spiritualize away pain. It's asking you to consider, just consider, that what you're experiencing might be the soul's graduate work, that the intensity isn't evidence of abandonment, but evidence of readiness. That you're not being punished, you're being forged. And when this life completes, when you cross back into the luminous realm where souls review their incarnations, you may look back at this passage and say, yes, that was exactly what I needed. That was the fire that Ademi gold. Until then, you don't have to understand it. You just have to endure it. And trust that your soul knows what it's doing. Some deaths don't just change individuals, they change history. Edgar Cayce spoke of souls who incarnate with missions larger than personal karma. These are beings whose very presence and whose absence shifts collective consciousness. Their deaths become medicine for the masses. Think of figures throughout history whose manner of departure awakened entire cultures, whose sacrifice exposed injustice, sparked movements, or altered the moral imagination of generations. Cayce called these collective catalysts, souls who agreed before birth to become public symbols. Their exit isn't just personal completion, it's public initiation. In one reading, someone asked Cayce about the sole purpose of those who die as martyrs. His response was nuanced. Not all who die for a cause have chosen that death at the soul level. Some are simply casualties of human cruelty, but some have agreed to become the lightning rod. Their departure is strategic. It attracts collective attention to what must be addressed. They give their physical life to shift the trajectory of many lives. This isn't limited to famous figures. It operates at every scale. A documented case from the archives: a teenager died in a drunk driving accident in a small town. The grief was overwhelming, but in the aftermath, that town's entire relationship to alcohol and youth culture transformed. Schools implemented new programs. Parents started having conversations they'd avoided. The culture shifted. Years later, multiple young people from that town reported that the memory of that death had literally saved their lives. They'd made different choices because of it. The departed soul became, in death, a teacher to hundreds of people they'd never met. Cayce's readings suggested that this teenager's soul had known, had agreed, had chosen to serve in exactly this way. Not because the universe is cruel, but because sometimes the only thing that shatters collective denial is collective grief. Another case: a mother of 5 died of cancer. Before her death, she wrote letters to each of her children to be opened at different stages of their lives. These letters became the container that held her family together through decades of challenge. But more than that, her sister published excerpts of those letters, and they went viral. Millions of people read them. Millions of people were changed by her words. Cayce's reading for her family indicated that she had known, at a soul level, that her written voice would reach further than her living presence ever could, that her death would become the platform for a message that needed to reach the collective. This is the mystery of collective catalysts. They often accomplish more through their absence than through their presence. Their death becomes mythology, story, medicine that travels through time. But let's be clear about what this teaching is not saying. It's not saying these souls had to die. It's not saying their deaths were inevitable or that we should be grateful for tragedy. It's not bypassing the very real injustice of systems that create conditions where certain deaths become necessary catalysts. What it is saying is this: in a universe where consciousness is the primary reality, where souls are far more vast than bodies, where death is transition rather than ending, some beings volunteer to use their departure as an instrument of collective awakening. They don't do it because they're forced. They do it because they're so committed to evolution, their own and the collective's, that they're willing to become the sacrifice that shifts everything. And from the other side, Cayce indicated, these souls watch the ripples of their departure with profound love. They see how their exit activated changes that might have taken generations otherwise. They understand that what looked like tragedy from Earth was actually strategy from the soul's perspective. If you've been impacted by such a death, if someone's departure changed your life, woke you up, set you on a different path, Cayce would say, that was the gift. Receive it fully. Let your life become the evidence that their death mattered. Let your transformation justify their sacrifice. Because that's how collective catalysts complete their work, through those of us who carry forward what they initiated. Their death plants seeds, your life brings harvest. And the cycle continues, lifetime after lifetime, with souls taking turns as planters and harvesters, until the whole field is transformed. Sometimes the explanation is simpler than we think. Sometimes a difficult death happens not because of karma or service or ancestral clearing, but because the soul completed what it came to do, and the body became an obstacle to returning home. Edgar Cayce described this as soul readiness versus biological timeline. In the ideal scenario, these two align. The soul completes its mission, the body naturally ages and fails, and the departure is gentle. But sometimes they don't align. Sometimes the soul finishes early. And when that happens, the death may appear difficult not because the suffering serves a purpose, but because the soul is simply done and the body hasn't caught up. One reading described a woman in her 50s who died of a sudden stroke. Her family was devastated. She was healthy, active, had so much more life to live. But Cayce explained, this entity came to complete very specific work: the healing of 3 primary relationships, the releasing of ancient grief, and the modeling of forgiveness for her children. All 3 were accomplished by her 48th year. After that, she remained only out of habit, not purpose. The soul was ready to return. The stroke was not tragedy, it was release. This teaching invites a different question. What if some of us actually complete our life's purpose before our bodies naturally expire? What if there are souls who, by midlife or even earlier, have learned what they came to learn, given what they came to give, experienced what they came to experience? They look around and realize, I'm finished. This chapter is complete, but the biological vehicle still has decades left. And rather than endure what feels, to the soul, like unnecessary extension, they orchestrate an exit. Not suicide in the conventional sense, because the conscious mind may have no idea this is happening, but a soul-level decision to release the body before its natural end. Cayce called this spiritual impatience, not in the negative sense, but in the sense of a soul who knows its own completion and sees no reason to linger. One documented case involved a man who had what appeared to be a sudden heart attack at 60. He'd been in perfect health, no warning signs, just done. His widow consulted the readings, grieving deeply but also confused. They'd had plans, travel they wanted to do, grandchildren not yet born. Cayce's reading was tender. Your husband's soul carried great urgency. He came to resolve specific karma, which he did. He came to love and be loved, which he accomplished. He came to experience forgiveness, which occurred in his 42nd year. Everything after that was grace, bonus time. But the soul doesn't linger when the work is complete. It returns home. This isn't about judgment. It's about recognizing that souls operate on different timelines than bodies. Your body might be designed to last 90 years, but your soul's mission might only require 40. And if you're someone facing mortality earlier than expected, or if you're watching someone you love depart too soon, this teaching offers a different lens. What if they finished? What if, despite how it looks from the outside, they actually completed their curriculum? What if their death isn't interruption, but graduation? Cayce offered a practice for discerning this. Review the person's life not chronologically, but thematically. What patterns came to resolution? What relationships healed? What qualities did they embody or master? If you can identify clear completion, clear moments of transformation, integration, closure, then consider that their soul knew what it was doing. The difficulty of the death itself, that might simply be the friction between a soul ready to leave and a body built to persist. One more case, this one especially poignant, a child who died at age 7 from an aggressive illness. The parents were shattered. How could 7 years be enough? The reading explained that this soul was extraordinarily advanced. It had incarnated briefly, very intentionally, to accomplish two things: teach its parents about unconditional love and model radical presence. Both were accomplished within the first few years. After that, the soul lingered only to complete the physical cycle it had initiated, but it was ready to return. The illness wasn't curse. It was the soul's mechanism for completing the exit when biological death wouldn't have occurred naturally for decades. This teaching doesn't make the grief easier. It doesn't erase the longing or the questions. But it offers perspective. Maybe they weren't taken from you. Maybe they completed their work and chose to go home. And your grief, your love, your longing, all of it is valid. All of it is sacred. You can honor their completion and miss them terribly. Both are true. There is a line, a sacred boundary that we must honor, even as we explore these profound mysteries of soul choice and spiritual purpose. Because not every difficult death is a soul contract fulfilled. Not every moment of suffering carries hidden meaning. And not every tragedy should be spiritualized. This is the shadow side of the teaching you have received today, the place where discernment becomes not just helpful, but essential, where wisdom requires us to hold multiple truths at once, to honor the soul's capacity for choice while never excusing cruelty, neglect, or preventable harm. Edgar Cayce himself was careful about this boundary. In his readings, he distinguished between suffering that served the soul's evolution and suffering that resulted purely from human error, systemic injustice, or violations of spiritual law. He saw both, he named both, and he never suggested that we should passively accept all pain as divinely ordained. So let us be clear, let us be grounded. Let us bring this teaching back to earth for a moment so that it serves healing rather than bypassing, so that it empowers rather than numbs. There are deaths that happen because of medical negligence, because someone was denied care or given the wrong treatment or left to suffer when relief was available. There are deaths that happen because of violence, because of racism, because of poverty, because of systems designed to extract and abandon rather than nourish and protect. There are deaths that happen because of accidents that could have been prevented, because safety protocols were ignored, because warning signs were dismissed, because profit was prioritized over human life. These are not soul contracts. These are violations. And the spiritual framework we have been exploring today, the idea that some souls choose difficult deaths for evolutionary purposes, must never be used to minimize, excuse, or justify these realities. Cayce was explicit about this in his work. When he encountered cases where suffering resulted from human cruelty or negligence, he did not frame it as karma or soul choice. He called it what it was, a deviation from divine law, a failure of love, a wound that needed both earthly justice and spiritual healing. In one reading preserved in the ARE archives, a woman asked about her child's death from a preventable illness. The medical system had failed them. Treatment had been delayed because of their economic status. Cayce did not tell her that her child's soul had chosen this death. He told her that injustice had taken her child, that the systems of the world had failed in their duty to protect the vulnerable, and that while her child's soul was at peace now, held in higher dimensions of love, the grief she carried was legitimate. The anger she felt was righteous. He told her to name what had happened, to speak truth, to work, if she could, toward changing the conditions that had caused such unnecessary loss. This is the balance. This is the shadow work within the teaching. Because here is what can happen when we spiritualize everything, we lose our capacity for discernment. We begin to see all suffering as somehow meant to be, and in doing so, we become passive, complicit even in systems that cause harm. We stop advocating for pain relief because we think the pain is teaching something. We stop demanding justice because we believe karma will handle everything. We stop preventing future tragedies because we frame every loss as a soul's choice. This is spiritual bypassing, and it is dangerous. Cayce warned against it, though he did not use that term. He warned against using spiritual concepts as shields against the discomfort of facing real, material injustice. He warned against confusing soul-level agreements with earthly failures of love. So here are the red flags, the signs that spiritual framing has crossed into harmful territory. When it prevents someone from receiving medical care they need and want. When it is used to silence grief, to tell the bereaved that they should not be sad because everything happens for a reason. When it absolves perpetrators of violence, suggesting that their victims chose or needed the harm that was done. When it discourages action, when it leads us to accept preventable suffering rather than working to change conditions. When it becomes a way of avoiding our own discomfort with death, with injustice, with the randomness and cruelty that does exist in the world. These are the moments when the teaching must be set aside, when what is needed is not spiritual interpretation but earthly intervention, medical care, legal advocacy, community support, systemic change. Cayce understood this deeply. He spent his life offering healing, yes, but he also consistently encouraged people to use medicine, to seek proper treatment, to advocate for themselves and others. He never positioned spiritual knowledge as a replacement for earthly action. He positioned it as a complement, a deeper layer of understanding that should inform and empower our work in the world, not excuse us from it. So how do we hold both truths? How do we honor the possibility that some souls do choose difficult deaths for evolutionary purposes, while also remaining fiercely committed to preventing unnecessary suffering? The answer is discernment. And discernment begins with listening, truly listening, to the person who is dying or to those who loved them. If someone is suffering and asking for relief, we offer relief. We do not tell them their power. In is a lesson they must endure. If someone is dying and expressing fear, terror, resistance, we meet them with comfort. We do not lecture them about soul contracts. If a family is grieving a preventable death, a death that happened because of negligence or violence or systemic failure, we bear witness to their grief. We validate their anger. We do not rush to spiritualize their loss. The teaching about soul choice is for those who are searching for it, for those who come to the mystery willingly, looking for a framework that might help them make sense of what feels senseless. It is not a teaching to be imposed, not a teaching to be used as a shield against the hard, messy, painful realities of how death actually unfolds in a world that is still learning to love. Cayce's readings show us this. Over and over, we see him meeting people where they are, offering spiritual insight when it serves, and offering practical guidance when that is what is needed. He told people to grieve, to rage when rage was what lived in them, to question, to struggle, to refuse easy answers when easy answers felt like betrayal. Because the soul's journey is vast, yes, but the human heart is also sacred, and sometimes what the human heart needs most is not explanation, but presence, not meaning, but solidarity in the face of meaninglessness. There is another dimension to this shadow work. The recognition that even when a soul does choose a difficult death, even when there are evolutionary purposes at play, the people left behind still suffer. Their pain is real. Their grief is valid. And we must be careful not to use soul contracts as a way of dismissing that pain. In one case from the archives, a man lost his wife suddenly, violently. The reading suggested that her soul had completed what it came to do, that her death, though tragic in appearance, had served both her own evolution and the awakening of others. But the reading did not stop there. Cayce also spoke directly to the husband's grief. He acknowledged the weight of loss. He validated the man's anger, his confusion, his feeling that something had been stolen from him. He said, in essence, yes, her soul made a choice, and yes, you are allowed to grieve what that choice cost you. Both truths held at once. This is the mature spiritual teaching, the one that does not bypass human emotion in favor of cosmic perspective, but instead honors both. Because we are both human and soul, we live in both time and eternity, and the losses we experience in the human realm are real, even if they look different from the soul's vantage point. So if you are grieving a difficult death and someone offers you this teaching about soul choice, you have every right to set it aside, to say, not now, not yet, maybe not ever. Your grief does not need to be spiritualized to be sacred. Your anger does not need to be resolved to be valid. Your questions do not need to be answered to be worth asking. And if you are someone who wants to share this teaching with others, please bring discernment, bring humility, bring willingness to sit in the discomfort of not knowing, rather than rushing to explain away someone else's pain. Because the greatest service we can offer each other is not answers. It is presence. It is the willingness to sit beside someone in their darkest hour and say, I don't know why this happened, but I am here, and your grief matters. Cayce's work teaches us this too, that sometimes the most spiritual thing we can do is be fully human with each other, fully present, fully willing to not know. So as we move forward from this chapter, carry this with you. The teaching about soul choice is an offering, not a mandate, a lens, not a law, a possibility to explore for those who find it helpful and to set aside for those who do not. Honor the mystery without forcing it. Hold space for both cosmic purpose and earthly injustice. And never, ever let spiritual concepts become a shield against the work of making this world more just, more compassionate, more life-affirming for everyone who walks it. Because that work, too, is sacred. That work, too, is part of why souls come here. To learn, yes, but also to serve, to build, to protect, to love in action, not just in theory. And the most profound soul contracts might not be the difficult deaths at all. They might be the lives dedicated to preventing them. If you have stood beside someone as they made a difficult exit from this world, your soul carries a mark. Not a wound necessarily, but a knowing, an imprint, a change that cannot be undone. Because witnessing death, especially difficult death, is its own form of initiation. And if no one has told you this yet, let me say it clearly, what you experienced matters, what you witnessed changed you, and you deserve care, support, and practices that honor the weight you now carry. This is the healing chapter, the one we have been building toward, the place where mystical teaching becomes practical medicine, where spiritual insight transforms into embodied support. Because it is one thing to understand intellectually that souls may choose difficult deaths, it is another thing entirely to watch it happen, to hear the labored breathing, to see the pain in their eyes, to feel your own helplessness as someone you love struggles at the threshold. Edgar Cayce understood this deeply. His work was not only with the dying, but with the living who surrounded them, the families, the caregivers, the witnesses who absorbed so much in those final days and hours. And in his readings, he offered guidance, both spiritual and practical, for how to navigate the aftermath, how to care for yourself when you have stood at the edge of the mystery and looked into it with someone you love. So let us begin here with the first truth you need to hear. What you absorbed during those final days was real. Energy is real. Emotional fields are real. When someone is dying, especially when they are dying in pain, in fear, in struggle, their experience creates ripples that affect everyone in proximity. You may have taken on some of their fear without realizing it, some of their pain, some of their unresolved emotions or energetic patterns. This is not weakness, it is not failure, it is simply what happens when hearts are open, when love is present, when you refuse to turn away from someone in their hardest hour. But it means you need clearing, tending, rituals of release. Cayce spoke often about the importance of what he called energetic hygiene, the practice of consciously clearing yourself after exposure to intense emotional or spiritual experiences. And death vigils qualify, absolutely. So here is the first practice, the daily clearing ritual. Each evening, for at least the first few weeks after witnessing a difficult death, take yourself through this process. Stand or sit in a comfortable position. Close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths, consciously releasing tension with each exhale. Then, in your mind's eye, imagine a column of white or golden light descending from above, entering through the crown of your head and filling your entire body. As this light fills you, set the intention: I release anything I absorbed that was not mine to carry. I return it to the earth, to the universe, to the care of higher forces. I reclaim my own energy. I restore my own boundaries. See the light moving through you, gently dislodging anything heavy, sticky, or foreign. See it carrying these energies down through your body, out through the soles of your feet, into the earth where they can be metabolized and transformed. Then imagine the light sealing your energy field, creating a protective boundary around you, not to shut out the world, but to help you discern what is yours and what is not. This is not complicated, but it is powerful. Cayce recommended variations of this practice for healers, for empaths, for anyone whose work or relationships brought them into contact with suffering. And it works, not because it is magic, but because it engages your consciousness in the act of releasing what you were never meant to hold. But there is more to healing than energy work. There is also the body. Because trauma and witnessing difficult death is a form of trauma, lives in the body. It writes itself into your nervous system, your muscle memory, your breathing patterns. You may notice, in the weeks after the death, that your body feels different, that you startle easily, that you hold tension in places you did not before, that you feel exhausted even when you have slept. This is not imaginary. This is your nervous system processing what it experienced. And it needs support. Cayce was a strong advocate for somatic practices, bodywork, movement, water therapy, anything that helps the physical form release stored tension and return to balance. So here are some practices that can help. Breath work for nervous system regulation. When your body is stuck in hypervigilance, when it feels like you are still on watch, still waiting for the next crisis, conscious breathing can signal to your nervous system that it is safe to rest. Try this. Breathe in slowly for a count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6, hold for 2, repeat for several minutes. The longer exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you that governs rest, repair, and restoration. Do this daily, multiple times a day if needed. Your body will begin to remember that the vigil is over, that you can rest now. A somatic release through movement. Trauma that is held in the body needs to move through the body, not be thought through, but moved through. This can look like shaking, dancing, walking in nature, yoga, or even simply lying on the floor and allowing your body to move however it wants to move. Cayce spoke about the intelligence of the body, how it knows what it needs to release if we give it permission and space. So set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes, put on music or sit in silence, and let your body lead. Let it shake, stretch, curl, sway. Do not try to make it look a certain way. Just let it do what it needs to do. You may be surprised by what emerges. Tears, sounds, memories, let them come. This is clearing. Water as medicine. Cayce recommended water, especially salt water, as a healing tool for energetic clearing and nervous system support. If you have access to the ocean, wade into it. Let the salt water wash over you. Set the intention that it is carrying away what you no longer need to hold. If you do not have access to the ocean, create your own ritual bath. Epsom salt and sea salt work beautifully. Add a few drops of lavender oil if you have it. As you soak, imagine the water drawing out the heaviness, the grief, the images that replay in your mind. Imagine it all dissolving into the water, being neutralized, transmuted. When you drain the tub, imagine everything you released going with it, down the drain, back to the earth, out of your field. Water is ancient medicine, trust it. But healing is not only about clearing, it is also about honoring. Because what you witnessed was sacred, even if it was hard. And part of healing is finding a way to integrate the experience, to let it change you without letting it break you. Cayce spoke about the concept of sacred witness, the understanding that bearing witness to another's passage is a profound spiritual service. You were there because you loved them, because they needed someone to hold the space while they crossed, because your presence mattered even if you felt helpless. And that service, that love, that willingness to stay, it counts. It means something in ways you may never fully understand. So here is a ritual of honoring. Create a small altar or sacred space in your home. It does not need to be elaborate. A candle, a photograph, an object that reminds you of the person who died. Sit with this space regularly. Light the candle. Speak to them if you wish. Tell them what you witnessed. Tell them what you carry. Ask them if it feels right to help you release any burden that was never yours to hold. And then, this is important, thank yourself. Thank yourself for staying, for loving, for not turning away. Thank yourself for being willing to stand at the threshold, even when it was terrifying. This is not self-congratulation. It is acknowledgement. It is the soul recognizing its own courage. And that recognition is part of healing. There is another layer to this work, and it involves guilt. Because many people who witness difficult deaths carry guilt, the feeling that they should have done more, known more, been more. The replaying of moments where they made choices that, in hindsight, they question. If this is you, please listen carefully. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time. You are not responsible for outcomes you could not control. You are not omniscient, you are not all-powerful, you are human. And the person who died, their soul chose its path. You did not cause their suffering. You did not fail them by being unable to prevent their pain. Cayce's readings are full of this reassurance. Over and over, he told grieving family members that they had done enough, that their loved one's soul was at peace, that the guilt they carried was an illusion, a distortion, a misunderstanding of how soul contracts actually work. He said, you cannot live someone else's life for them. You cannot die someone else's death for them. You can only love them, and you did. So if guilt lives in you, bring it into the light, write it down, speak it out loud, let yourself feel the full weight of it. And then, gently, begin to question it. What if the choice you are regretting was actually the right choice, given what you knew? What if the thing you think you failed at was never your responsibility? What if their soul's journey included that moment of pain, and your presence was the comfort, not the cause? What if you are allowed to be imperfect, to be human, to not have all the answers? Healing does not mean the guilt disappears instantly, but it means you stop feeding it, you stop rehearsing it, you start offering yourself the same compassion you would offer anyone else in your position. Because you deserve that, you truly do. Now let us speak to those who are anticipating a difficult death, who know that someone they love is approaching the threshold, and the signs suggest it will not be easy. This is anticipatory grief, and it is its own unique form of suffering. Because you are grieving while the person is still alive, you are mourning losses that have not yet happened. You are bracing yourself for an impact that keeps not coming until the tension of waiting becomes almost unbearable. Cayce understood this, too. In his work with families navigating terminal illness, he often spoke about the importance of presence over preparation. He said, you cannot prepare for what you do not yet know, but you can be here now with what is. So age. Air is the practice for anticipatory grief. Each day when you are with your loved one or thinking of them, bring yourself fully into the present moment. Not into the imagined future where they are gone, not into the past where they were healthy, but into this moment exactly as it is. What is real right now? What can you see, hear, touch, feel? Breathe with them if they are present. Hold their hand if they will let you. Speak to them even if they cannot respond. And when the future tries to pull you forward, when the fear of what is coming rises up, acknowledge it. Yes, I am afraid. Yes, I am grieving. And right now, in this moment, we are still here together. This is not denial. This is presence. And presence is the greatest gift you can give, both to them and to yourself. Because when the end comes, you will not regret the moments you were fully present. You will only regret the moments you were absent, lost in worry about what had not yet happened. There is one more practice I want to offer, and this one is for the long term. Because healing from witnessing difficult death is not a linear process. It does not happen in a neat timeline. It unfolds in waves, in layers, in unexpected moments of grief that surface months or even years later. And that is okay. That is normal. So here is the practice. Create a grief container. This can be a journal, a voice memo folder, a box where you keep letters or objects. But it is a designated space where you allow yourself to fully feel whatever arises, whenever it arises. When a wave of grief comes, when a memory surfaces, when guilt or anger or sadness wells up, go to your container. Write, speak, cry, rage, let it all come out in that space. And then, when you are done, close the container, set it aside, return to your life. This is not repression, it is boundaries. It is the practice of making space for grief without letting grief consume everything. Cayce spoke about the need for what he called emotional compartmentalization, not as avoidance, but as a way of honoring that you are both grieving and living, that both are true, that both deserve space. So grieve fully when you grieve, and then, when it is time, set it aside and return to the world, to the people who still need you, to the life that is still unfolding. Both are sacred, both matter. And finally, if the healing feels too big to hold alone, please reach out to a therapist who understands grief, to a support group for those who have witnessed difficult deaths, to a spiritual counselor or energy worker who can help you clear what words alone cannot touch. Cayce's work reminds us that we are not meant to heal in isolation, that the soul's journey includes community, support, and the willingness to receive help when we need it. You have carried this alone long enough. Let others help you carry it now. Because you are not just a witness, you are a soul who loved someone enough to stay with them through the hardest passage. And that love deserves tending, that love deserves care. So tend it, honor it, and let the healing begin. There are moments when death feels complete. Not easy, perhaps, not without pain, but complete. As though something ancient has been finished, as though a contract written long before this life has finally been fulfilled, as though the soul who has left can rest now not just from the body, but from something older, deeper, heavier. This is karmic completion. And while not every death carries this quality, some unmistakably do. You can feel it in the room, in the silence that settles after the final breath, in the sense, strange but certain, that something has been accomplished. Edgar Cayce spoke extensively about karma, though not in the way many people understand it. For Cayce, karma was not punishment, it was memory. It was the soul's ledger of unfinished business, unresolved relationships, and lessons not yet learned. And every lifetime, the soul returns to work with that ledger, to resolve what can be resolved, to heal what can be healed, to complete what remains incomplete. Death in this framework is often the moment of settlement, the moment when accounts are balanced, when old debts, not debts of money or crime, but debts of love, of betrayal, of harm caused or received, are finally released. And when that happens, there is a palpable shift, not just for the soul who has died, but for the entire soul group connected to them. So this chapter is both mystical teaching and practical ritual, a way to recognize when karmic completion is occurring and a ceremony to honor it, whether you are the one dying, the one witnessing, or the one left behind.